Well, thank you.
No, they'll know the right questions to ask so that the rest of us dumb people who are ignorant of the whole thing will understand, including me. Anywho's, okay. Now, this is Mike Stern. He's going to be the primaries person, and he'll introduce everybody else. And I'm just going to kind of turn it over to them right now, okay? So don't be shy. Ask them the questions we need to know.
Good evening, everybody. Let me introduce the table. Jerry Healy, Linda Cummins, Mike Cummins. We're kind of winging it tonight. Sarah Baker was to be handle this and go through this. Sarah's sick. She backed out about 3:30 this afternoon, so we're going there. Our critique group prepared this document, this book, Stories and Poems. 725 years of experience went into that.
Wow. How much?
Just means we're all old.
Yeah. Of the 725, I'm 25 of it. It's okay. And anyway, we did bring some copies if people are interested. It's stories and poems, everything from memoirs, fiction writing, poetry, which was the product of our group. The group, we call ourselves...
How much?
Oh, $10.
So?
The group is, we call ourselves the Story Whisperers. We're from the Alegria Retirement Community, and this group was formed at that community, and all of the members are at that community. Jerry, who was in from the beginning, will just explain to you very briefly at this time how the group was formed.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, a year ago, this last February, they put out an email, Alegria did, to all the members there, all the people who live there. And they said, anybody interested in writing can come to the clubhouse on a certain date, and we're trying to put together a writing group. So about 20 people showed up, which was really surprised there. There's only 370 houses in our community. And so 20 people showing up wanting to write. We all talked about what our interests were, what we liked to write. Almost everybody, except for Sarah, had no experience, just writing what they felt. There was memoirs, fiction, all kinds of things. Anyway, about the next week, about 5 of them dropped out right away. We got down to 10, and Sarah said, why don't we start meeting at houses, different people's homes, and do it as a critique group. So that's how it started, and over the year, it took a year to put it all together. We each contributed either 4 stories, short stories, or a couple short stories and a couple poems. And some people just put poems in and stuff, but there was 10 of us, which is a large group, we're told, for a critique group. The other people in here that were in critique groups, 3 or 4? 6.
6 to 8.
We've heard 3 or 4 is a good number. With 10 of us, our meetings would last long. They would last 2.5 hours because somebody would read, and then we'd go around the circle and everybody would kind of give their comments. But we would send the stories out email a week before, so everybody had time to read it and let it soak in and give their comments. Then they would write it, they'd print it out and write their comments at the end of sentences and punctuation and all the corrections, so that they'd all hand them in to you at the end of the meeting. You could take them home and then go through it and see what worked and what didn't work for you. One of the great things about that I learned is nobody tried to change your story and make it their story, which is something I think some people worry about, but didn't happen with us. So we had a good time. Everybody became friends. I don't like him.
Nobody does.
No, that's Mike. He's a wonderful guy. But we had just had a good time together. We went out to dinner together before Christmas and Thanksgiving, you know, and just with our wives and husbands and everything, and everybody had a good time. So I would recommend it to anybody.
Okay. Just background, we've got Sarah's notes here, and what we're going to do is use that as the format. If what we say you find helpful and enjoyable, it's because we did it. If you don't, let Sarah know, because it's her fault. Right? Okay. So I'm going to run down and keep her basically her format. And basically it's why, when, and how. That's the deal. Why do you form a critique group? Why is it necessary? And a lot of these apply to all of us, some of them individually or some together. To improve your writing, obviously, that's what you want. Feedback, improve your writing. You want impartial feedback from someone other than a friend or a family member who isn't going to hurt your feelings. And impartial is really important, like Jerry just indicated. It's not to change somebody's writing. It's to give them your opinion or your thoughts and maybe some suggestions, which they're free to accept or to not accept. You want to prepare a public project for publication, and this is what it was. There's blood, sweat, and tears in there. Plenty of tears. When some pieces you write, you can't get through without it. It's you on the page. Learn about more about writing. I had written a lot in my profession, but nothing like this. And the short stories, I had never written a short story. Some people say I still can't, but anyway. But the short story, I mean, without the help of these people, I don't think I ever would have done it. You want to get motivated to keep writing on track. That's what we need to do. When you get older, you really need to get motivated, but it applies to everybody. And for social interaction with other writers. People were great. Our group was 10. I came in late. I guess I came in several months after they formed, but I was accepted right away until they found out who I was, and then they tried to throw me out, but that's another story altogether, right? And another reason is just if you want an audience for your writing, something to bounce things off of people for. The when are you ready, all kinds of reasons when you want to do it. One of them is you want to be ready to receive feedback, One of the things that Sarah said, which really struck me on this, about the when, and I think this is really important, it's when you're ready to commit the time to critique other people's writing, and when you join a critique group, when you can separate your ego from your writing. Big deal there. I'm working on a novel as well, and I had the most perfect first chapter. The most perfect. I mean, it was elegant. I mean, it remained the same for 3 years, 150 revisions. I gave it to Jerry a couple of weeks ago for his comments. He gave me some comments back. I threw it out. Not his comments, my first chapter. It's just, I want to be a better writer. And his input helped me to become a better writer. He didn't tell me what to write. He gave me his impressions, and that's what I acted on. Anything you guys want to add so far? I'm good. Okay. So,
you're on your own, buddy.
You guys are
I'm
gonna
on my own. Way down. Okay.
You can do an Irish jig.
Yeah, right, I did. All right. What do you form them? What's the basis for forming them? It can be for anything. You can form it around a genre, a location, a specific social group, like a small writing group, or age group. We qualify retirement, but it was the age group that was there, and it was social, but it was also a desire to become better writers, or writers in the first place for some of us, because a lot of us hadn't written this type of thing before. You can do it in person. You can do it online. There are groups out there on the web that you can get into. Anything that works for you is important. There's no magic formula to all of that. The groups can be any size, small or large. We were pretty large. I mean, we couldn't have handled many more just because of the time elements and all that. But the interesting thing was that with the large group, it's amazing how so many people write in a different way. And so you develop a style. One of the things for me was a lot of the sentences that I write are long, involved sentences. Other people write very short sentences. Some of the people in the group said I was verbose. Some of the people said I have a classical style. And I could then sort that out and decide what my style was, because the style has to reflect who you are, how you write, how you see things, how you approach things, how you describe things. And that helped. So no two of us wrote the same way. No two of us wrote on the same subject the same way. But it allows you to find yourself, find who you are, what style you're comfortable with. Okay.
That's good.
That's
Keep
it?
going. You've got 45 minutes.
Okay.
It'd be like this. I'll tell you why you're thinking.
Yeah.
One of my suggestions about it is that if, in your critique group, it would be really helpful if you had somebody we had an English teacher, and she was extremely good with punctuation. And that may not sound like the story, but at least she would say, I believe your paragraph is great, your sentence is great, but you need to block this here. You need to, this doesn't need, she hated exclamation points.
Yep.
And she would say, if you have to put an exclamation point in there to get your point across, you're not getting your point across. The reading of it is the exclamation. And there were sometimes I would do, and there would be, in 1,800 words, I'd have 37 exclamation points. That's not necessary. You know, it's like, I love bananas, exclamation point. She said, that's not, so I think that's a good key. And then the other one is to have somebody, we had Sarah. Also, now you'd been published before, correct? No. But there had been others in the critique group, but Sarah has been published many times. Therefore, her experience and the one with the English teacher was really beneficial. So if you have somebody that has that background, I think that works really well. One of the reasons that I got into the critique group is that, like Jerry said, we got an email one day. And it's not that, this is my wife Linda, it's not that we don't communicate, but, look, we don't communicate.
I'm about to communicate.
You can read between the lines. One day she said, you know what, I got this email and I've been thinking about doing something. And I said, yeah, me too, I'd like to go to the writers group. And she was just floored. She said, are you serious? And I said, yeah. We had never done anything like that before. It was an absolutely wonderful experience. Because, oh, and if anybody can't understand East Texas, I'll have an interpreter to come up and do it. But, and one of the reasons I did want to do it is that I always loved, if you can't tell, telling stories. I just love to tell stories. I could talk to you for 30 minutes about mayonnaise. I just love to tell stories. My dad once said that I would climb up in the top of a bodark tree to tell a story. Anybody know a bodark tree? Are you serious? You do?
No, I'm serious, I don't.
Wow. I wish I could spell
Tell
it.
us.
It's a bodark tree grows in the east part of Texas, and they have these. You know bodark trees?
No one knows
No,
about
but
You need to look it up. I mean,
Find out.
it's a fascinating tree. It's got thorns and things in it, and they have these bodark apples, and they're green and they're gnarled looking.
Oh, yeah.
Now you know.
It's a mock
And
orange.
once they
It's
drop,
a mock orange.
yeah,
Yeah,
once,
I know what they are. I'm in New Jersey.
yeah, bodark.
Well, they call it mock orange.
Okay, I call them bodark. Anyway, when they drop, they get kind of mushy, and they're full of Elmer's glue.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just sticky and greasy, and so when you get it on you, you just stick to a wall. Anyway, that's what my dad said. He said you'd climb up in the top of one of those trees to tell a story. But to be able to put it down on paper was my biggest drawback. And that's, the critique group helped so much with me presenting a story. And then it would be like Jerry saying, I understand this, but I believe if you tweak it, if you critique it, not to criticize it, but to give you ideas and suggestions about it. It's absolutely a wonderful thing. And I see my 5 minutes are up.
One of the key things about a critique group is make sure you have enough time when you meet.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. We had certain understood rules and we had certain specific rules, but basically the idea is that you want to critique and you want to be honest, but you want to say it, you know. Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean, you know. And the other aspect of it is that, again, it isn't your writing. This is just how it struck me. And that, I think, is what we really shared. That was a big help for us. A big help was because, you know, when you lay your heart down on a piece of paper and give it to somebody, you don't want them to say, this is garbage, you know. You want them to say, well, you know, I didn't understand this, or I didn't do this or not. And then after the first 50 times, you get used to that. But, you know, the idea is really just make it honest, make it truthful, follow, and then you can assess it any way you want to use it. We did adapt rules, and we'll go over the rules at the end of this, but it's always important to make sure the rules are rather fluid so that they can be changed from time to time.
Can I
Yes.
I think one of the things, everybody was nervous at first about hurting someone's feelings. And I don't know, the people who are in groups in here, it's kind of hard because you're very sensitive. Everybody wants to say something nice. Oh, it was great. It was a great story. And you're thinking to yourself, what was it about? You know, but you don't want to put it that way. So after we got to know each other, it was much easier to be honest without being mean, like Mike says, or too critical. But just to, you know, say, I didn't understand that part, you know, something to that effect. One of the things that helped me the most, I found, was when somebody would say something like, you'd have a paragraph up here, and then you'd have a paragraph down here, and someone would make a simple suggestion like, you know, if you took this paragraph and put it up there and moved this one down there, it would fit and flow so much better. You go, the light comes on, you know? That's what I loved about this group. It taught me so much that way.
I'd like to say, it's reaching, I'd like to say one thing. Can you hear me? Okay. I think it was great that when people came, they realized that they were coming for help. They weren't coming, you know, for just a happy hour or whatever. We were there to work, and so we would read our pieces aloud. Like Jerry said, we'd get the work ahead of time, and everybody had a chance to make their markings on it, critique it, think about it. And then when we actually got in the group to discuss it, you read your own piece. Now sometimes we would switch that around because we found that someone else reading your piece reads differently than you read your piece. And so that was kind of beneficial to switch back and forth like that. But I think one of the keys to this group is that we were basically all novices except for Sarah and maybe one or two others who had had some articles published. And everyone was helpful. No one was wanting to push their own work over yours. Everybody took a fair shot at you, and then, you know, you got down to business, revised it. And if you wanted one of the particular members to critique it even more than we'd done in the big session, you could call them and say, hey, could we just get together and go over these pieces? I'm a little confused about this. I wrote a piece about working on a reservation, and I was very pleased with it. And when I read it the first time in the critique group, it was interesting. Most of the men liked it, right?
Yes.
Most of the women did not. A lot of the women said that they were somewhat offended because of how I described the reservation in 1984. And I said, well, that's what I saw in 1984. But by them helping me, I was able to put it on paper differently so that it didn't come across as condescending or critical. And it was just, it didn't take much. And then I started to realize when I write, read it back to myself over and over. And I know you all are much more experienced probably than I am. But it's amazing to me how you write, and then one day you get up and you sit down and you look at your story, and all these things come to your mind about how you can make better changes. And so I appreciate the work you all have done in allowing us to be here. We've had a fabulous time, and the biggest chore now is to decide where we're going from here. Some people really want to work on books they're working on and not take so much time in the critique group. So we're at a crossroads, so just keep your fingers crossed for us that we find our way.
Thanks, Linda. So, getting back to the rules or the procedures, our procedure that we adopted was basically a piece would have two, probably three or more edits. The first time it was read, but the work was sent out to everybody in advance, so they all had an opportunity to read it and make comments to it on the work. Then it was read, then we talked about it. The second time, then when the second time the piece came up, a couple of times they were read, but mostly they weren't, because we could just talk about it because it had all been read once. We had those comments, and then we were more editing of the second. And then by the third time, depending on the quality of the work, it was done. And we talked about throwing it in the hopper, meaning that, okay, it may have some final editing to do, but this is definitely going to be considered for the anthology. And it tended to speed that up. My guess is with smaller groups, you're not going to have to, you don't have to limit yourself to maybe 3 of those. But we covered a lot of territory when you consider there's probably 30 different pieces of work or more in this book, and we did all of those from starting with nothing to final publication in a year. Especially since, well, we tried to meet periodically, coordinating 10 schedules was pretty difficult. So sometimes we'd meet every other week, sometimes it would be a month, but there was always that communication and coordinating with everybody on that. My observation was, as we got later into the cycle, when you were doing new pieces, the new pieces didn't need as much editing as the earlier ones did, because by then you had found your style. By then you had recognized how it was affecting some other people, and all. And the interesting thing I found out is that, and it was for most of us, it was me especially, I did not think I could write as well as some of the people in the group thought I could write or said I could write. It's like, for me, it was like getting a new pair of glasses and seeing more clearly what I was capable of doing. I was very protective when I first came in because I didn't know who these people were. Now I'm protected because I know who they are. So no, it was just the idea that it was like baby steps. I was learning to walk and all, and over time I trusted them implicitly with their comments, and I could analyze those comments. And little by little, it dawned on me that I am a pretty good writer, at least in my own mind. But it was far beyond what I thought I was capable of, and that's the group help, the group experience, I think, on that. I would think, just because I'm a nature of specific procedures, I would have liked to meet specifically so many days, maybe every week or every other week or something, rather than bounce around. But we accommodated our schedule. We accommodated it and all. And then the other thing was, for us, we had a goal. And the goal was we were going to prepare this book. Well, that doesn't have to be the end all. It can be whatever the group wants to do or wants to be. But that was for us, and that gave us a working target. And we adjusted the time frame a little bit as the seasons went on and as time went on. But
But we had deadlines.
Yeah, and we did. We had deadlines and, but sometime the group was gonna be, maybe we were gonna finish up the writing by September or then November or something. But we kept to the goal. We got the goal for that. So, let's go to, for Sarah anyway. I'm gonna run down the structure of our critique sessions just to show you how we did this. We basically had a schedule, we maybe start at 1 o'clock. Well, you get there on time or earlier, so you have about 10 minutes to socialize as everybody arrives. Then we took a few minutes, a short topic on, if we had one about how to improve our writing. If there's somebody came across something that had, an article they had read that they wanted to share, they'd bring that, and that would be at the beginning. And then we'd have any decisions we had to make or little topics we had to do. And then we finally got into the critiques. We kept a list of the articles so we could plan ahead. So if, for instance, there were three, we did about three, try to do three, maybe four per meeting. So if you were like the sixth in line, then you'd be on the waiting list, and you'd go to the your work would go to the next meeting, unless somebody above you wasn't ready to do it, and you could move up. So, but we kept it in order. We kept a list. We tried to adhere to a schedule. We didn't try to push as much as we could into everything. So critiquing 3 or 4 works was probably about maximum for us. We tried to spend 3 hours together. It gives you an idea. But when you're listening to 10 people or 9 people make comments on your work, you're going to need more time, or you're going to have fewer works to talk about, and that's what we did. Then at the end, we'd schedule the next sessions, and then we'd socialize, and that's what we did. So for us, the suggestion guidelines are: arrive on time, keep comments pertinent to work being critiqued, adhere to the schedule of what, or the order of the works as they were ready for critiquing. Be sure to email your work, which was going to be critiqued, to the people in advance to give them an opportunity to come and be prepared. And if whether the work needed to be read aloud or not. Again, first readings were read aloud usually, sometimes second readings. I don't think we ever did a third out loud reading at all. We all sat in a circle, and everybody shared. Everybody got their thoughts in. And the other thing was we rotated who would run the critique each meeting so that they could keep it going. And that to me was very important, because you got to keep people moving. You got to keep it. We had a lot of territory to cover. And for that reason, we wanted to make sure that we could get the work done. So let's, Jerry?
Just the people in here who are already in groups, can I ask a question? Do you guys in specific groups, like you write mystery, you write fiction, so you could have people in your group that write everything, right? Okay, well that's the way ours was. But I have been told that some people go to specific genres, like if they write romance or they write fiction or whatever, that's the critique group they want to be in. That makes sense to me in a way. And I just wondered what other people's thoughts were on that, if they had any. Because for us, with 10 different people, we had people writing memoir, fiction, all kinds of things. Poetry.
Since you've got the mic, why don't you talk about the group's effect on you, what you might do differently, if anything?
Well, the group...
Jerry, I
He
want
asked
to
a
say
question.
something because this is still on the subject. And I'm curious about those of you in critique groups. We have a gal who writes fantasy. Not any of us knew anything about fantasy, and we really didn't know how to critique her work. So what do you do when that situation comes up? I guess it's you.
Well, when it's outside of our purview, our genre, we look at it for character development, story arc, the commas, you know, the basic stuff. I think we feel, and there's 6 of us in our group, I think we pretty much all feel that a story is a story is a story. And some of them are, there's different rules for different genres, which is one reason you would maybe want to go to a genre critique group. But the problem with being in a single genre critique group is you don't get exposed to the other writing.
That's true. Yeah.
So we've always had multi-genre in ours, but you know, you look at the commonality of the story. And yeah, we had a fantasy writer a couple times in ours, and you know, I've appreciated it because I've learned a great deal about it. I didn't always understand what they were talking about, but it helped. I think it helped them when we would say, this character is what? They've got a who's it and a what's it and a what? So they would go back and maybe fix it a little bit, so people like myself, who I write westerns, and you know, you got your good guys and your bad guys, and when you've got fantasy, you never know who the good guy and the bad guy is. So I think it was very beneficial.
Thank you.
I'll share one experience I had, which was directly a result of this group. When I'm doing the writing or all that, I all of a sudden become aware of more things that are going on around me. And my wife and I are bicycle riders. We were out riding one day, and I saw a father and a son riding their bike, and they just passed us. I saw them for no more than 10 seconds. That's all. And I immediately put the story together. I started to wonder, what's their relationship? What are they thinking? Where is that headed and all that? I never would have done that had I not had the experience in this group. It's that awareness thing. And in fact, that's one of the stories that's in the book. Another situation I shared at one of the meetings, a particular situation I was in when I decided in middle age to become a tap dancer. And I told a story about what I went through to finally secure the appropriate attire for being a tap dancer. And Sarah thought that was the funniest thing she ever heard. I'd never thought about putting it down. That's in the book. I mean, that's what happened. This critique group, for me, gave me the confidence to go ahead and share these things, or to prepare them, or think about them, or before I would just pass over them. But it made me more aware, and that I think is a real benefit of having people, being in that situation where you're having people critique things, and now you're looking, because you want to write more now, you're looking for that next story and all. So that was a positive benefit for me. If I would have done anything differently at all, maybe we could have cut down a little on the socializing more than we did, okay? But it was a good group, and you know, just a lot of mutual respect and care for each other. Yeah.
You had said that you did writing in your professional life.
Yeah.
How did that help with what you're
Well,
getting into now?
what I'm doing now, it's totally different. When I was working, I was an attorney. So what I did was I wrote briefs, and I wrote arguments, and they had very structured facts, law, or issues, law, discussion. And so my writing all initially began exactly that way, where I'd lay it all out, you know? And because that was the only writing I knew. Now, I could write those briefs really well, you know, okay? But this is different. This is not, well, you're saying again, which is, you want to just ask you about, I forgot about it.
Oh,
No.
show don't tell.
Yeah, show don't tell. Well, that was all telling writing. I had to do that. And the other thing about it was that there can be no ambiguity when you're writing the writing that I used to do. There could be no ability to interpret it any way other than the way you wanted it. Now I write, and you can interpret it any way that you want it. The story is there, okay? And the other thing was that that old writing was deductive. It was like a cone, you know, facts, you know, issues, law, the discussion. It would all hold down to a particular point. Now the way I write is it's an inverse cone. Because the first thing I write about is what am I trying to say here? How am I going to end up? And then I generally work backwards to the beginning on that. My story evolves from trying to prove a point or to make a statement or to provide a principle, which is the whole subject. The whole story is to drive that particular thing home, which means, of course, that I'm now doing everything backwards. So,
what it personally did for me, you asked me that question a few minutes ago, it helped me with discipline because I had to read 3 stories and be ready for the next meeting and do my critique of them. I had to write my story and get it ready for if it was going to be reviewed in the next critique meeting. And it gave me confidence too. It helped me a lot with my confidence, reading out loud in front of people. You know, just, and you can feel your writing get better with the help of these other folks. And to me, that was a big help. I really enjoyed that part of the whole journey. And like Linda said, we don't know what we're going to do next, but somebody suggested that, and I don't know if anybody's ever done this before, that we start writing a book and one person writes a chapter, then we review that, then it goes around to the next person, they write the next chapter. Has anybody done that? Gene Hackman, he lives up in, you know, everybody knows Gene Hackman, lives up in Santa Fe. He writes like that with a partner. He writes from his house, emails it to the other guy, he writes the next chapter. So it's going to be an interesting experience if that's the way we go next year, but we're not really sure yet. We haven't decided. Question back there.
And this is probably for those of you who are in writing groups, because yours was put together by your community, but for those of you in writing groups, how did you find your writing group?
Southwest Writers.
There's also, if you Google like critique groups or writing groups on the web, you know, they can communicate. You can communicate online also, and there's, you know, you'd say like fiction critique or nonfiction critique or something like that, and romance novel critiques. Boy, wouldn't you like to listen to that one? But anyway, you know, it's, you know, that all, so that can be done. Yes, sir.
I would just like to follow up on that. I have tried that, and nothing happens. You know, you think you have a group, you know, you submit your stuff, a handful of them may submit their stuff, and that's pretty much the end of it.
Is it?
So you know, that's part of why I'm here, you know, tonight.
Okay.
I usually just come to the Saturday meeting, but, you know, I would like to be in a critique group. I would like to have FaceTime in a critique group, and I'd like to have be in a critique group that is specific to my interest, which is novel writing. The only other writing I do that's short, I do some erotic iambic pentameter, but, you know, it's like, I don't want to put that out there. So my question then would be, how do you, like, physically and structurally, how would you form a critique group where you can be with people with FaceTime, but you don't have access to, you know, like I live out in the sticks, you know, my only contact, you know, with civilization is basically here.
I was going to say move to Alegria. It's on 528.
Yeah.
And you can join our group. We're going to probably have somebody drop out this year.
Response for that question?
I might. I have been on Facebook for a long time with different writing groups, and there are several writing groups that are actually in Facebook, and they'll send chapters, they get together that way, and they send chapters across the country or across the world to each other, and then everybody comes back and it's usually a short piece or something they'll get together. And so sometimes if you're stuck out away from people, that's a way to go. But you can also, on our website, we actually have a page for people who want to form critique groups that you can look at, or if you want to form one in your community, you can send something to Kathy there at the Sage, and also to Kathy Wagner at the website, and she will put it on that page that, you know, wanting to form a romance writers critique group in the South Valley, or any genre in the South Valley, this is the location, and here's my contact information. Be careful, even with us, of the websites and stuff. You know, I tend to not want to put a lot of things like people pick up emails off of websites, and then you get all kinds of junk mail. You know, sometimes phone numbers are actually a better thing in that case, but that's entirely up to you. Or you may have, like me, I have 4 emails. 3 of them are useful, and one of them is my junk email site. So I put that on things because I expect that one to get picked up, and because it's going to be out there. So I know it's going to have a junk, and I'll just go through real quick and see if there's any jewels in the junk and throw the rest away. Yeah, well, when you have different responsibilities, sometimes it helps to have multiple emails. Does anybody else have something, Sarah?
So for in-person groups, there's a website called Meetup, and it's a coordinating site for lots of different clubs, and you can get onto, I think it's just meetup.com, and there are a few different clubs that meet in Albuquerque, there's a few different clubs that meet in Santa Fe, and they use that to kind of coordinate stuff, so you can get in touch with the clubs through that. And then with online clubs, specifically science fiction and fantasy, there is a critique group called Critters, like little things that crawl on the ground, critters. And that's what I've worked with personally, and they are very active, very good about getting responses. There's a lot of people there, so you don't usually hear from the same people every week, but you always get some feedback on your work.
Rose? Yes, Jackie?
For anybody that's interested in writing screenplays, New Mexico Women in Film has a screenwriting group that meets every Monday night at the YMCA. Indian School. And that is every Monday night. It has a very specific hierarchy of you have to attend so many times before you can bring your work forward, but they'll do 10 pages every week until your script is done. Then you can bring, I think it's acts, so you bring thirds, and then you get to do the whole thing. And the interesting thing about this particular group is they have actors that come to every one. So it isn't, in most groups it's just the other writers who read the work. But in this one, they're professional actors that come. So the parts of your script are assigned to actors, and if you're lucky, that person reads it for the how many weeks in a row, and the same actors read it when they do the table reading. So it's a really interesting way to get your work read, but also to hear it.
What time is it?
It is.
No, what time is the meeting?
I think it's 6 to 8, it's a little early.
6 to 8 on which day?
Monday night.
And is it restricted to women?
Nope, and it's not restricted to members of New Mexico Women in Film. And so you can just go on the New Mexico Women in Film website, or talk to the office manager and she can get in touch with me.
Getting back to what Jerry said about somebody writing a chapter, then somebody else, and somebody else, nobody did that. If you come back here about this time next year, you can buy our work. Okay. Was there a question in the back?
It's kind of coming from a different angle, but twice a year, UNM Continuing Ed puts out a little, they offer about 10 courses in writing, and that's my workshop. I'll pick one on poetry or short stories, and then for the next 3 months, 2 or 3 months, I get feedback from 15 classmates, and each of us puts something in. And if you want to go wild in this area, start a creative writing MA or MFA program, because for 3 years then, you just get inundated with feedback from your classmates. I've got short stories from 30 years ago with 20 critiques from classmates. I got so many of them, too many to go through. But the question is, the thing I've found in a couple of writers groups that I've been in here in Albuquerque is everyone is writing a novel, and I lose track of the storyline, you know, when we have like a chapter every couple of weeks. So how do you handle that? Because if I have if there's short pieces in one session, it kind of works. But novel's tricky.
The answer to that is short stories and poems. I mean, if you're going to get involved in a novel like, you know, a novel where you're carrying this plot for week after week and month after month, I can see where that would be a problem. But that really wasn't our situation. You know, it may turn out to be as we go forward. Yes, ma'am.
When I formed my critique group, I asked my members if they would be willing to read a whole manuscript every year or two from me. So they came into my group knowing that they would read a whole manuscript at some point. So that's how I dealt with wanting to have an overview of an entire novel.
So does that mean you basically had a group of beta readers, or were you also critiquing pieces along the way?
We actually have some picture book writers and early readers. It's a children's book writers group. So there's always some picture books that we're reading every month. Sometimes there will be parts of novels, but they all know that they might get my entire manuscript once a year or every 2 years.
I can tell you with my novel that I'm doing, when I've finished the draft I know for the last time, I'll send it out to somebody I have confidence in to read, and I'll get theirs back, and then I'll start editing again, you know, because that's the way it is. But it's not really a group per se, but I'm using resources that I'm aware of, who I trust, so I can send it to them too. There was a hand back there.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, you know, sometimes I don't listen because I'm back here doing something else. So I don't know if you asked everyone who's interested in being in a critique group. I heard you asked like who already is in one, but who wants to be in one?
Who?
Would you raise your hand?
Wow. There you go.
That's great.
There you go.
Make a list.
Yeah.
Can we get a list and get copies of it?
you started.
I know.
Can we get a list?
Do we have that $10 sign-up fee? All right, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions before? Well, thank you very much for listening to us. We apologize if we're, you know.
I know.
I know, it's great. Thank you. And they do have the book for sale. If you're interested in doing a critique group, then you might go over there